National Park in Canada. She's been president of the Washington Audubon since 2014 and the ornithologist for Natural Area Preservation, a division of the City of Ann Arbor Parks and Recreation since 2016. She coordinates and compiles the Washington bird count as well as leading many field trips for WAS and NAP. The joke at work is, what does Juliet do in her free time when she's not working? The same thing she does when she's at work. Juliet enjoys birding, baking, and canoeing, as well as anything outdoors. Her many friends and her family are her greatest gifts. Juliet lives in Ann Arbor with her husband, and they have a college-age son and daughter. Matthew Spore. Matthew is a native North Dakotan who has been loving Ann Arbor since 2019. His bird addiction started with his first eBird checklist in March of 2014. Birds have opened a door to the wider natural world that has found his interest expand to plants, insects, and fungi. He particularly enjoys leading birding and nature walks while introducing people to the wonders of our interconnected ecosystem. You will often see him biking around town or wandering the natural areas in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and Matt is some field trip here to Washington Audubon.
Awesome. Just remember to check yourself in on the check-in list at some point today before you leave.
Yeah. And I'm tried really hard to edit this down to the essentials, but I'm really scared that I'm going to talk too much. So for today, Juliet and I are going to switch off between different topics. I'm going to go over bird biology and behavior. Juliet's going to do bird identification. I'm going to go over some of the birding resources that you might be interested in. Juliet's going to talk about conservation, and then we're going to jump into the field session after our break and after questions. The first question, obviously, I'm going to probably sit down after a minute too. Why don't I just do that? I can't see yours. Okay. These see my notes. That's not fair.
Cheating.
So I think the best place to start is, what is a bird? Characteristics that all birds share. They are all bipedal, and they're all feathered, and they're all vertebrates. Birds evolved a host of novel and anatomical features that are directly or indirectly associated with the evolution of flight. Even penguins, the evolutionary beginning of that started with the evolution of flight. All birds are toothless and feed using beaks and bony tongues. They all have a unique vocal apparatus called the syrinx, which provides them with the most complex and diverse vocal capabilities of any animals. Like mammals, birds are also endothermic. These are warm-blooded, which influences many aspects of their anatomy, physiology, and ecology. All birds lay eggs. This is kind of unique to such a large class. I should step back and say, and I'll repeat this again later, when we're talking about birds, it's important to remember that birds are a class. Remember kingdom, phylum, class, King George came over, order, family, genus, species. So it's way up the tree of evolution. So there's a lot of diversity of birds. Think of mammals. Let's think about how many different kinds of mammals. We got birds. I mean, in mammals, we have bats, we have elephants, we have humans, we have mice, we have platypuses that lay eggs, for example. So when I'm talking about birds, you've got to think that there's a wide diversity, just like there is in mammals. So when I'm saying these things, understand there's always exceptions, like in biology. But all birds do lay eggs, so that's kind of unique. Most species of birds provide their young with extensive parental care, most. They're intelligent and they have complex brains. What is a bird? Birds are dinosaurs. Millions of years ago, a bipedal theropod evolved. This is the last time I'll read something off of a slide. I did want to read this, I really like this. Millions of years ago, a bipedal theropod dinosaur evolved a novel and empowering structure, the feather. Feathered insulation enhanced the ability to control its body temperature, thereby increasing its activity and endurance. Feathers evolved into diverse and complex structures, which lead to the evolution of flight, which led to the evolution of flight. Mastery of flight opened a world of ecological opportunities, and a new group of vertebrates, the class Aves or Aves, have evolved and then thrived. Today, the birds constitute the most species diverse class of four-limbed vertebrates. Feathers evolve many different forms, and they're specialized for each part of the body. Feathers that are in the wing, these actually attach the bone, ultimately along the wing. Tail feathers, body and contour feathers that sort of cover and protect. Down, we all know what down's for. Semi-plumes and those bristles that I talked about. The one thing I wanted to point out with the primary feathers is notice the asymmetry here. If you look at birds like the ancestors to modern day birds, the feathers are very symmetrical, much like this contour feather. And there's a reason for this. Think of an airplane wing. An airplane wing is very asymmetrical, right? It allows differentiation of airflow, and I'll go over that a little later. But I wanted to point that out here. They also resist the bird. Bird banders use this a lot, because they can look at the molt pattern and the wear on certain feathers and what feathers are new, and they can tell you a lot about that bird. Is it a hatch-year bird? Is it 2 years old? Depending on the species, they can tell you a lot about the aging of that particular bird based on what feathers have molted, how long ago, what the wear is, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a little mind-boggling, but quite interesting if you want to jump into that. Look for a book called Molt. It's really good. I like this as an example of bird molt. It's an American goldfinch. If anybody has a bird feeder, I'm sure you've seen these. So this kind of shows the evolution. This is from Sibley Guides, and they actually have a 12-month. I kind of skipped a few, but you can step through these, and it explains all of the different periods of molt for a goldfinch. So in January, this is, technically in December, they're in complete non-breeding plumage at that point. So they're kind of the most fresh, time between December and January. So that's where I'm going to start. So they've got fresh feather. They've completely molted everything. They got fresh body feathers, head feathers, body feathers, and they've molted their wing and tail feathers as well. But as they get into March, and as they move into the breeding season, they're going to just molt their body feathers. They're not going to molt their wing and tail feathers. Those are a lot more energy, and will take a lot more time to do that. So you can kind of see this process as these body feathers start to be changed, and this is a male. You'll notice that he's slowly moving from these kind of drab feathers and replacing the crown with nice dark black. And you can see in the May here now, we're into full brooding plumage. The wing feathers will continue to fade and wear. Notice that the wing feathers from here to here are quite different. The changes you see in wing and tail feathers over the season is due to wear, right? It's not new feathers molting. Always find that kind of neat, right? They'll come back a few minutes later and move that piece of food, right? So they're quite smart. They have great memory. Black-capped chickadees in colder climates can store 80,000 seeds per season. They scatter hoard. They can recall where, what quality, and what's been eaten. Hippocampus larger in birds in colder climates for this reason, to have that memory that they need to store. And also that hippocampus grows larger in the fall, preparation for winter, than it is in summer, because they don't have it. You'll notice this in bird physiology. They will grow and shrink all different kinds of things in their body depending on their need. I'm going to go a little long, but I'll make up for it at the end.
No, that's fine, because you're...
Movement. So it's not just feathers. So there's many adaptations for flight based on evolutionary history. There's air sacs in the bones. I'll talk about that when we get to respiration. They have concentrated urine. Humans store our urea in the bladder. Birds concentrate that urea in uric acid and do not store it anywhere. They get rid of it. They can't afford the weight. They need to get rid of it. Eggs. When we talked about eggs, that's an evolution for flight. This allows a bird to have offspring and still be able to fly, right? I mean, if they're carrying something to gestation, they just only carry an egg in for 24 hours. It takes 24 hours from follicle to develop to when it's laid. And it can account for 2 to 12% of body weight, so it's not something they want to hang on to. Shape and flight. There's a study of 1,400 species of birds, and stronger flyers and the ones that spent more time in flight had less round eggs. They were more oblong. So again, back to this evolution piece. So they're stronger. Like ones that have stronger flight, they're strong flyers, fast flyers, and then also those like chimisorts that spend a lot of time in flight. Their bills, they don't have a heavy jaw and they don't have teeth, right? They have a very light bill. No birds have teeth. up there. So again, flight.
It's important for bird science and research that when we're out looking at birds, we're able to get down to the species level. So we're going to look at the parts of the bird. Okay, what am I doing first here?
You're gonna go against that, and then you're gonna sit. You don't have notes though, right?
Some of them do.
Your notes will be here. And that's
Okay.
what's showing up there.
All right. So, I want to go to my first photo. Here's some of the things we're going to go over in terms of bird identification. There. Okay. So here are the parts of the bird. This is, I'm guessing, a composite bird. I don't think it's a real species, but if somebody knows what it is, you can correct me. When we're out looking at birds with our binoculars, oftentimes it's not immediately apparent what the bird is. We might be able to get it into a bird family, and I'll show you some I'll show you a chart of silhouettes, and that can help you get to family. But there might be another bird who looks really similar to this, but the cheek patch is red instead of purple. Or it doesn't have an eye line. You can see this eye line is not listed up here. That's the only one that's not. Just that black line that goes through the eye here. That's an eye line, and we often use that when we're looking at a bird in the field. Does it have an eye line? Then it's a Tennessee warbler. Does it not have an eye line? Then maybe it's a hooded warbler. Okay. We often use eye ring as well for an identifier. That one is super important. Often these eye rings are white or yellowish. Supercilium is this area, the white line generally over the eye. Supercilium. Does the bird have a supercilium? Yes, it does. Okay, it's going to be maybe a pectoral sandpiper versus solitary sandpiper that has more of an eye ring. The crown of the bird can vary in color. There can be stripes up there. The forehead of the bird, this area right here, can be different colored. These lores are between the eye and the bill. This area here, and often a bird like a white-throated sparrow will have a yellow lore, also Savannah sparrow. So that can help you distinguish between a Savannah sparrow and a song sparrow. Both sparrows, both about the same time, both. Warblers are a family of birds that are neotropical migrants. They're heading now from the boreal forest through Michigan, which has Mississippi flyway and the Atlantic flyway kind of converge down through the state. So we have more birds migrating through Michigan between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron than they might have west of here. Once you get to the Rocky Mountains, birds aren't typically trying to migrate over large geographical structures. I'd have people start eBird on their phone.
Yeah.
Everybody's got eBird loaded on their phones, right? So go to the app. And I've already opened mine, so show what it looks like.
So you go to your app, and it's pretty hard to miss. Say start checklist.
And you press start checklist. And then it's going to look like this. And whenever I see a mallard, I'm going to press the plus sign, and it's going to make one mallard go on my list.
And we'll be keeping a list that we can share with everybody, but you can practice using it out there. And another thing that's really useful in using eBird is you can search instead of scrolling through necessarily. You can search for the bird by typing it in. One trick that's really helpful is, I'm not going to go into banding codes, but I will say this about banding codes. Every bird has a banding code that's a 4-letter abbreviation for that bird. And if you type that in when you're searching for the bird, it can really quickly pull up that species. Generally speaking, banding codes are, if it's 2 words, like great egret, it'll be GR, first 2 letters, and then EG, first 2 letters of the second. So GR-EG. If it's like one bird, like a Ixisel, D-I-C-K, any one-word bird will just be the first 4 letters of the bird.
Yeah, so if if you just start typing in, if there's a blue jay going over, if you just start typing in BLU, blue jay is going to pop up as one of your options. Just press that and then indicate, and then you got one. After the paved area runs out, and we're going to search for birds on the impoundment here. There's a dam at the end of this stretch of river, so that's why this looks more like a pond than a river. We're going to search for water birds. We're going to find some herons probably. Maybe we'll be lucky with a kingfisher. And in the woods, we're going to be listening and looking for movement for birds. Like we said, most birds are not singing this time of year, but they may make some kind of sound. We could hear a chickadee. Chickadee-dee-dee is their call, not their song, but it's the most identifiable of the sounds they make. And if we hear chickadees, many migrating birds flock with chickadees because chickadees are local, they are friendly, and they know where the food is because they live here. So if you're a migrating warbler or a vireo or a thrush, you're listening for chickadees as well, just like I am, because they know where the food is and you're going to hang out with them. So one of the tricks to finding migrating birds in the fall is listening for chickadees. I'm going to be making the official one for our group, and I will share it with everybody because I have all of your emails.
And they need to get food, make it through the night. So if you're looking for them, you want to go to the best time to go birding, it's going to be first in the morning. Quite as active until it warms up a little bit. When the insects are more active, so that may be a little bit later in the morning, like maybe 9 or 10 instead of 8. Yeah. That's a territory and main attraction thing, yeah. So why are they, when they're screaming in the morning, why are they doing it?
Example of an invasive species, the mute swan.
The white swans out there.
Swan is larger than Canada goose, you can all see. The swans are Eurasian species, the mute swan, and they were introduced as ornamentals on people's, which is a value neutral term. They're invasive, which means they cause harm to other wildlife and ecosystems. They are hard on other waterfowl. They're more aggressive than our native swan, which is
on the swans there. So another species that Juliet alluded to that you'll start seeing as winter approaches, as winter gets here and a lot of the area water starts freezing. We're very lucky in Washington County to have quite a large population of trumpeter swans, which is a species of special concern.
it's a
Threatened species in Michigan. So we're quite lucky in Michigan that along the stretch of river, especially down by Furstenberg, I've seen up to 70 trumpeter swans there. When the rest 7-0.
Yeah, and trumpeter swan has an all-black bill that kind of slopes down to the tip.
Yep.
Whereas this mute swan has a kind of a black knob and the black.
That bright orange bill on it.
Are trumpeter swans threatened because of these swans?
Trumpeter swans were actually extirpated from the state around the time of colonization and were reintroduced in our state in the 1990s and have spread from there. So their populations are increasing in the state and they're about to be delisted to be a species of special concern rather than threatened. Threatened gives the bird legal protection. If you had a trumpeter swan nesting on your pond, you could not drain that pond legally, and you certainly can't hunt them, and you're not going to lose that. But they probably will be delisted from threatened to special concern within the next few months. They're on the docket.
And trumpeter swans do nest in the area. They prefer kind of like smaller bodies of water surrounded by woods, but are also over at the M14 pond, which is a kind of a weak water settlement pond. They've not been very successful there. The young couple has had some failed breeding attempts. But they like to nest in those types of areas, but they do need like enough open water to be able to take off. So they're going to need like 100 yards is, I think, the minimum of open water in order to get flight when you see them take off.
There's a cormorant in the really bad area. There's a brown fellow with a yellowish bill in these little pads between the island and the bridge. So this is one of those occasions where you want to scan with your binoculars.
And it wants to be able to swim around and fish down there. So buoyancy kind of works against it. So feathers will actually take on a little bit of water, it doesn't get totally wet. But you'll often see cormorants sort of drying off, and part of that is thought to be, trying to dry out because they are able to take on some water. Like Anhinga, the little snakes swimming in the water.
Yeah, Anhinga's in the same general family as fish.
Yeah.
Yes. In this particular instance, the female also has a rusty band with a blue band, so she's slightly more colorful. Many of the males will stay here year-round, as Matt alluded to. If there's open water, most of the females will migrate, but if there's a large stretch of open water, we sometimes will have a
kingfishers we're talking about.
They'll nest in kind of the river banks, along the river, and they have these tiny little feet that are just ridiculously small. They can barely perch, it looks like. But they'll dig burrows in these river banks, and how they start this process is they will like ram, so they'll fly in with their bill and ram the bank until they get a depression, and they're able to get in there and start digging it out. Wow. These are an example of cliff swallow nests that I showed in my slide. We have a number of populations that nest here. I have something interesting to say about cliff swallows, but before I do that, I wanted Juliet to talk about, we were talking about house sparrows before, and this is a good example of what's going on with house sparrows.
Yeah, so cliff swallows are cavity nesters. They build their own mud nest with a cavity entrance, a hole. And before the cliff swallows get back from migrating, the house sparrows move in because it's a cavity nest and build their nest, and they're aggressive and they kill other native birds. They kill native birds that are not able to defend themselves. When they're on their nest, the house sparrows actually will come in and peck the native bird on the head. So you'll see any of these nests, cliff swallows, a colonial nester, any of these nests that have a bunch of trash coming out of them, you can see a house sparrow nest right here. That's the house sparrow moved into that nest and claimed it before the cliff swallows even returned from migration. And so if there's too many cliff swallow nests that are invaded by house sparrows, this entire colony will collapse. Because they're
Interesting thing about cliff swallows from an evolution point of view, is there an example of how quickly evolution can happen? We think about evolution happening over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, but there's an example of cliff swallows evolving different wing size over the last 50, 70 years. So as you notice, this is along a roadway. As you can imagine, being next to a lot of speeding cars can be quite dangerous. What they've found is, since the advent of automobiles and nesting on bridges, they've evolved shorter wings, and they've documented this over time. So on average, cliff swallows' wings are shorter than they were 50, 70 years ago, because shorter wings allow more maneuverability. I don't have that backwards, do I?
No, that's correct.
Yeah. Because if you have shorter wings, you're more maneuverable. It's disadvantageous for migrating, because the longer if you notice birds that have really long wings, or wings that kind of project to their tail or past, you can be pretty sure they're a long distance migrant. So it has a disadvantage. But I thought that was really interesting that these shorter wings was noticed like in the last half century.
And prior to colonization of our area, cliff swallows nest in cliffs and cave entrances over water. And so in areas where cliff swallows nest, in those natural areas where they evolved, they may have longer wings than the ones in the urban areas.
So have these already migrated?
Yes.
And so then the sparrows have moved in and
The sparrows,
done.
nobody's nesting anymore.
oh,
We're
so
done
where do the
nesting for
sparrows
years.
go?
They're all around you.
They
So
go
get-
to the Owen Kroger.
But again, remember, like, you know, birds are using nests for nesting and raising young. Once they're done, unless they're using a cavity or something for roosting at night on a cold night, that's different. They don't have like one home they're going back to use night after night after night.
Yeah.
They use that nesting location to raise those chicks until they're fled, and they're done.
And they'll
More advantageous to have that dark morph, and light is light. Now, when this guy takes flight, one other characteristic that is a ID shoe-in for red-tailed hawk is in its armpits when it's flying at the front of its wing. It's called the patagium. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's armpits. It's going to have a dark area. It's going to be dark in the armpits, in the front of the wing, right where the wing hits the body. When you see a light-colored hawk and you see that mark, you see a little hint of a belly band, you know you're looking at red-tailed hawk. It doesn't matter if it has a red tail.
Preening. We talked about preening. And it's
Feather
very
maintenance.
important to keep your feathers in good order.
About bird ID, so one thing with raptors is we'll notice we can identify them by how they're holding their wings too. So we talk about that hawk watch. I find hawk watches actually a little boring. I don't find anything with birding boring because these guys are so good. They're like, there's a smack, away, and they're like, it's a turtle, it's a broad wing. They know exactly what it is. And the reason they know is they can look at the shape and how it's holding its wings. So for example, if you look at the red-tailed hawk, it holds its wings pretty straight, but it's got a little tip up at the end. It's not quite super flat. Whereas a bald eagle is like flat as a pancake, right? Flat as a pancake. You see a turkey vulture? Dihedral. Talk about dihedral, it's this V shape. And they're tippy. And they've got a behavior to them too, turkey vultures. You can tell the turkey vulture because it's tippy. And the reason it's tippy is because it's got a lot of wing surface and it's very light. It's way lighter than any of these hawks and eagles. And it has wing surface area that rivals some of these raptors. So it's very tippy. And it can stabilize by tipping because once you tip, you get more stability on this side. And they're fine. They tip, and you get more stability on this side.
What about an osprey?